Hey everyone, and welcome to the Joomla Shack conference. I'm delighted to have Anibal with me today. He has been a cornerstone of the Joomla community for many years. I've seen him in all sorts of different roles, from the Joomla extensions directory to writing articles to being a core contributor, and I'm probably missing about a dozen different roles that he's done. And I'm delighted to have him with us today to talk about using Composer in a CMS. I've got experience in multiple different CMSs, and I've seen people try to integrate Composer with them, and it's never easy. And so Anibel's going to give us some advice about how to do it successfully in Joomla. Welcome.
Thank you, Steve. Welcome, everybody. It's a delight to be here in the Joomla Shack conference presenting using Composer in a CMS. My name is Anibal Sanchez. It's a great opportunity to be here sharing with you our experiences managing successful projects and developing extensions for Joomla. I've been the X-List team leader for about 10 years. I am the co-founder of PHP Prefixer. It is a service that we have recently launched in November. I'm going to be talking about how use Composer in Joomla extension, are also integrating how you use it with our service. We're excited to share what can be done combining Joomla and Composer technologies, and I'm going to be talking more about that in the following slides. As a Joomla volunteer, I've been collaborating with the project for more than 5 years. At this time, I'm completing my second term as the team leader of the extension directory. I can say that it has been an immense pleasure contributing to the community. If you are interested in Joomla and you want to contribute, I invite you to join the project. Joomla is always looking for new volunteers, and volunteering is the way to help the project. So, to present my profile and what we do in our ventures, I'm going to introduce three of our projects. The first one is Perfect Publisher. Perfect Publisher is an extension to share content from Joomla to social networks. Since all social networks have libraries to integrate the APIs, this is a project where we have been integrating many social networks. At this time, the extension has more than 30 social media integration and use more than 60 Composer libraries. It has been a huge challenge to pack the libraries and publish them along these years in an extension. As you can see, it is double. In this extension, I'll be presenting several points about how we produce this extension and how we apply Composer libraries in this project. XT Search is one of our recent projects, where we have integrated the Algolia search technology with Joomla. In particular, in this extension, we have also created the solution as a module for PrestaShop. And as you can see, you can create extension for Joomla or modules for PrestaShop using the same libraries and sharing the business layer of the application in both platforms. And finally, this is a project where we work as consultants. We also do consulting for corporate and governmental projects. In this case, I present Si San Juan. This is a regional newspaper running Joomla in a cluster of web services behind a load balancer. In this particular case, we have created a distributed solution based on Redis and Laravel. We use this solution to coordinate activities between the cluster of servers. All these projects are perfect examples of what can be achieved combining Joomla and Composer. More of this in the following slides. This presentation is going to be about PHP development, and specifically about the development of solutions for Joomla using Composer. I'm going to do my best to be clear, explaining why this is an absolute necessity to use Composer to build business solutions. On the other hand, many topics are in the area of advanced PHP, so feel free to send me questions or feedback if something is not clear enough. For starters, Composer is the PHP dependency manager. You declare in a schema definition what libraries you need to use, and Composer downloads the libraries in the project. Composer manages the libraries between versions and dependencies between libraries. So sometimes when you declare a library, it downloads the library and all the dependencies associated with the main library that you need to use. 5 years ago, I was working on an extension and I had a problem. The library was available in packages, the site where you can explore what is published, and most of the times the components and the modules use the library and it worked perfectly fine. However, I ran into a situation where I needed to use the library, but other developers were also using the same library but with a different version. That it was incompatible with my requirements. This was a collision between my extension with the library with the other extension with a different library version. So these problems can appear when more than user or developer is installing different packages on the same CMS. This problem was an invitation to start exploring what Composer is, the classic use cases where it shines, the limitation and the solution that we can apply as Joomla developers. My objective of today's talk are to share with you those learnings and cover the fundamental ways that Composer provides to manage libraries and how it can be used on a Joomla solution. I'm going to share with you some tips and tricks and that I learned to help save some of the pain of trying having errors and trying to solve them. And I'm going to introduce this innovative service that we have invented to overcome Composer technical limitations. In this slide, I have written this phrase about standing on the shoulders of giants to represent the idea that our achievements are always based on the work of others. Composer helps us as developers to integrate the fantastic works that other people create. That we don't have to be hesitant to incorporate libraries from some successful projects. And that's one of the key that we can use to really improve our work. I encourage you to look for new answers with Composer. There are many reasons to use Composer. I only summarizing some of them. Once you have a good grasp on Composer, you can freely choose libraries from different areas of expertise. If you want to support a product on different platforms, that's the way to do it. The best alternative is to start on a neutral technology stack and to implement your business domain, and after that, port that business domain to different platforms, but always writing on an agnostic technology stack. The main incentive is focusing on the software definition and the business rules of the domain, instead of having to solve everything related with the framework that you need to integrate. In this way, you only integrate only once, and after that, you work integrating only the part of the CMS that you need to use. For example, in a classing extension, we define components, modules, plugins. And all of these assets use the CMS framework, in our case, Joomla. When we start thinking in terms of a library, we change our mind and we start to think in terms of Composer, how we migrate our code into the core library. The core library is the center of our solution. The idea is that we put the domain of the code of our domain into the library and all the associated dependencies in the library that we install. In this way, following this definition, the components modules are only entry points, and the main part of the extension is in the library. At the same time, we can clearly define in what is the interface between the library and the CMS. And the library itself, it has its own life cycle. So you can test the library and develop the library separately from the CMS. So the idea of this presentation is that we are free to use Composer libraries in our Joomla extension. And in the following slides, I'm going to present the different use cases of Composer on Joomla. The first way of using Composer is replacing the Joomla autoloader. Forget about how the classic autoloader or Joomla works, and replace it with the Composer autoloader. This is the simplest way to start using it. With a simple library, writing a simple autoloader and use it our classes and our code with Composer without integrating another libraries. This is the most basic case. Using Composer, we can declare a single autoloader, and it will automatically load the source code that follows the definitions. So Composer works based on PCR4 standard. This standard defines the name of the classes, the namespaces, and the path where the files must be located. This is not complex, and you only have to follow these definitions. For example, this is how one of our extensions works. It defines where the code of the package is located and where the automated tests are defined. The idea is in the final version of the extension, we only package the production code, and the tests are not distributed to the final extension, to the final package. Additionally, Composer has another ways to declare classes and files. That's the class. This is the most basic way of declaring the source code. You define a folder where the classes are located and the files that has to be autoloaded, and Composer only scans all the files in the folder and defines how to load them. This is a handy way to migrate legacy extensions into a modern autoloader. Internally, what Composer does is generating maps associating the classes, the files, and how they are going to be dynamically autoloaded. Again, packaging most of the code in the core library is the best way to distribute a package. This is how the zip file of one of our extensions with the core library looks like. As an example, to present this idea, I have created this starter project for Joomla. This project is divided into two repositories. The main repository where the entry points, the component is defined, and the repository where the library, the core library is declared. So this starter project integrates Laravel on Joomla. The core library contains the source code and the Laravel libraries. The core library has a simple view to render a list of 10 articles using Blade template and Tailwind CSS. So this is how the code of the view looks like. You declare the root of the URL that is going to retrieve the articles, and how the view is going to render the articles. This is a simple view, and you can install the extension and check that it only renders this view, but it's a good example how we can install in libraries and the other components. So until now, the architecture is sound. The Composer is great, and there are thousands of PHP developers using it. So it looks like a perfect world. So, but you know, there's always a catch. Composer works perfectly fine as long as you use it as a standalone tool. Composer is designed to work only on the developer computer. It's not designed to work online on a site. And it is a tool that to use at development time. It's not a tool that you can use on production. And so if we have two separated teams of developers using the same libraries, then if we have two teams working with the same libraries, the picture is clear, and it's the classic use case of development. The problem is if the teams are not synchronized and they use different versions of libraries, then you're going to find the original problem that I found, that we are going to be finding collisions between what one team uses and what the other team installs. And if they try to run the same code at the same time, you're going to find fatal errors or naming conflicts between what one team is trying to use and what the other team is loading. So if we plan to use Composer libraries in an extension that's going to be published in the extension directory, and you want to distribute it through everywhere, you have to use other techniques that they have to solve these potential problems. So back to our starter project, where I introduced the case of using Laravel in a Joomla extension. This is the libraries that are used in this project. For example, you can notice that here we are using the Gazelle library version 7. So if we find in a situation where one team is using Gazelle 7 and the other team, for example, is using Gazelle 5, they are going to be in trouble. For example, this is an example of the conflict that we can find. In this case, in Gazelle 7, you do this call in this way, but in Gazelle 5, the call is done very differently. So the two teams are going to collide, trying to do the same thing in different ways. And basically, what happens is that the first extension that it loads the Gazelle library is going to win, and they're going to have a conflict with the other one. The second extension that executes is going to break. So the classic solution for these conflicts in Composer. The most common way to solve the Composer conflicts between teams is prefixing PHP. The idea is changing the source code to add a prefix where the conflicts can appear. For instance, this is a piece of code from Carbon datetime library. In this case, we have added the xli prefix, and you can notice that here, Carbon, the namespace Carbon has a prefix with the xli prefix. In this way, when you add this prefix, you are working in a separated namespace, so you have solved the conflict with the other theoretic usage of the library. There are many cases to take into account, but this is the general idea how you can prefix the code to solve this kind of problems. The idea always is adding a prefix to uniquely identify the objects. The first time that I remember that I found these uses of this technique is on Akiva FOF. In this case, FOF uses Pimple as the container, and the class has the FOF prefix to create the proper context. And for example, you can check it on your Joomla site if you have Akiva backup installed, you can check that FOF is currently distributing Pimple in this way. So our question was at that time when we started to use this prefix thing in all of our extensions, we started to wonder how we could automate the manual task of prefixing, because at the end of the day, we have to apply the prefix to all files of the library that you use. We started to use a few commands to search and replace following specific rules. After a while, our first solution evolved into a full package based on a rule engine to do static analysis of PHP and generate the source code at the project level. So the answer to the question is yes. We can prefix entire project, and the results are outstanding. And this is that's how we arrive at the idea of creating a full online service to offer the PHP prefixing as a service. The prefixing service is a computing intensive task, and we are saving to do that task manually, so it's a big win. The prefixing engine parses all files, analyzes the dependencies of all libraries, and executes on several phases. It runs on multi-core servers, taking advantage of parallel processing. Today, it processes all files of a project, and it is done very quickly, saving a lot of time, applying the prefixes manually. For example, in revisiting our previous project, the starter project where we integrated Laravel, we can apply a prefix to show how it works. In the Composer schema of the library that we presented before, we have an extra definition for the PHP prefixer. In this part of the code, we defined the prefix for the namespaces and another prefix for the global objects. So in the service, you create the project, you upload the code of the library, the service processes the library, and after that you can download the output of the prefixing process. When the process is complete, you can download the source code and package and retest it to confirm that it was consistently applied. For example, here in the library that we download, I am retesting the unit cases of the monologue library that is included with Laravel. And of course, we can confirm that the original Carbon library is also prefixed with the prefix. Of course, yeah. This file has the Exley namespace added to the Carbon namespace. And that's it. The idea is that I have introduced the rationale behind the usage of Composer and why it is vital to use Composer in the development of an extension. I think that the evolution of PHP is currently linked to Composer as a dependency manager. I presented the case to use Composer in a standalone model and in the case of distributing a prefixing extension. I know that using Composer implies the redesign of the software. The main challenge is thinking in terms of packages and libraries. But the potential benefits, I think that the potential benefits of using Composer outweigh the initial learning process to work and transform the packages from the legacy way of working and developing extension to the new way of creating extensions. And the benefit is huge. You can use the latest innovation of PHP ecosystems and at the same time focus on your business. And as I have shown in my extensions, you can create your extension and distribute them in different platforms. So I think that a great huge gain, to create your products and distributing on different businesses or platforms. And that's all.
Cool. Thanks, Anibal. So this is mainly focused on using Composer from the point of view of extension developers, right?
Yeah.
What's been your experience of trying to move over your existing extensions, because you're an extension developer, from not using Composer and migrating them over to Composer? How difficult has that process been?
Yeah, I think that the point is that you have to start to think, you have your extension and you have your classic structure of folders where you have controllers, helpers, models, views, and the different files that you use in your extension. And you have to, the first thing that you do is you create a library that with Composer. With nothing, you start creating, an empty folder, and you start to move the files that you have in your legacy extension, your classic structure, into this library with Composer, and to play, with autoloader, and to simplify the structure of your extension, because you no longer have to use the classic Joomla autoloader. So you start using the Composer autoloader, and you move all the files from your one structure to the new structure. You are potentially going to start using namespaces, because in a classic Joomla extension you don't use namespaces. So you have to, for example, think if you plan to move, for example, to Joomla 4, you can redesign your extension and move to the namespaces and load them with Composer in this library. Once you move your files into the library, you think, okay, I can use more stuff from Composer and try to pick, handy libraries that use like an utility. For example, the Carbon library is a good example of a handy library that solved the problem of date management. After that, when you advance in the use of Composer, you start, okay, I'm going to replace the whole framework with another framework. And that's how we reached to the idea of using Laravel for everything. We are currently using Laravel Eloquent, Laravel Blade, and other Laravel stuff into Joomla. So
Oh, so you've not only migrated your extensions to Composer, but also to Laravel as well.
Yeah. It's not Laravel, the whole Laravel, because Laravel has it's a whole system of framework. It's a whole framework with a lot of stuff. We are only picking the pieces of what we want to use from Laravel. For example, Eloquent is an obvious choice. Blade, also the template engine to generate builds, it's a good pick. Or for example, in the case of the project that we run in a cluster of servers, we are using Redis to coordinate the activities of different Joomla sites. And so you pick the libraries that you need to use.
And where are we on the other side of things? We've been talking about using Composer for extension developers. What's the current state of things for Joomla users, for Joomla developers who want to manage their actual site projects using Composer? Is that increasingly in the Drupal and the PHP world? I've seen developers manage their entire sites using Composer. Drupal 8, I think, is going down that path so that you can manage and launch sites using Composer. Are we anywhere close to that for Joomla users?
I think that you're referring to the command lines that Drupal or Laravel have developed around Composer, but because sometimes when you have to deploy a system, you have to run a command line to take the site offline, deploy the solution, and after that, bring it back online. So they have created, a console client, an API, and a lot of libraries around Composer to do that part of the management. I think that in Joomla is not ready for that. It's still in development because right now they are creating a new command line for Joomla 4. So I think that we are not ready. We are not that there yet.
Okay. In fairness, they're probably not quite there in particularly Drupal either. It's a fairly buggy and inconsistent experience trying to migrate an old legacy CMS, which was never really designed for this, to the new world of Composer and packages.
In the case of Laravel, that is a modern system framework, they have everything to do that part, because they are always trying to distribute everything in terms of libraries in Composer, in packages. So you can download packages that they are free, they are open source, and they are also solutions that they are distributed with private repositories that you need a user and a password to download that libraries. But for what we do here, creating extension for Joomla, everything is open source and free, and you can use the whole framework, Laravel framework on Joomla.
We have a question in the chat for you. In your extensions, do you use Joomla classes, factory, database, and so on?
Yeah, of course. The idea is not replacing Joomla framework. What Joomla framework does, it does perfectly fine, and we are not really trying to replace that. We are only building what we need to build our systems. For example, I have this extension to search for content with Algolia on Joomla. In this extension, we have the part of the extension that it is integrated with Algolia, uses Algolia classes, the API. The extension also has a part that it works based on Laravel libraries, but it also uses the classic Joomla framework to load articles, to access the content, to access the database. There's a layer to access the CMS. So in this way, we keep everything separated. We use the best of each world. The Joomla part, we use the Joomla framework. And to access Algolia, we use the Algolia library. And to build the extension and the solution that we migrate between Joomla and the business part of the extension that we work on Joomla and PrestaShop is built on Laravel. That is our core agnostic framework.
Okay, and final question from me. Are we going to see any significant differences or improvements with Composer support in Joomla 4?
I think that it is going to be compatible with the current stack or the current usage. So I think that Joomla 4 is not going to change how we are creating extensions now. Joomla 4 has a different structure for extensions, but the current structure is compatible with the future Joomla 4.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Anibal. That was really fascinating.
Thank you very much.